Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
All right, well, welcome to Launch Code Podcast. We've got three great guys here today, but the main guy that we're trying to talk to is Glen Eberle from Boise, Idaho. He's going to give us the 5-minute overview of his company, his life. Welcome to the show, Glen. And then we also have Baker and Tier.
Hello.
So, Glen, take it away.
Glen Eberle checking in. Really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk to you guys. It's funny. I met Evan at a show in Germany. Just because I heard there was somebody giving out free coffee down the way, and I was like, oh man, I want one of those. And so he's back there. He's like brewing up cups, and hands went over, and I'm like, I live in my own private Idaho, literally. You know, I don't know what's going on in the world, so I'd never heard of Black Rifle Coffee. This is two winters ago, right?
Yeah, that was Iowa.
Or was it 3 winters ago? I lose track.
I do. So do I. 2 to 3.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really funny because I'm like, so do you work at that company? And he's like, oh yeah, you know, I kind of do. It wasn't until later I found I had a pretty significant role in it. And then, then the next thing was, you know, somehow it came up that I was from Idaho and that he was too, and you know, that was kind of a neat, you know, some point of entry with somebody where you get to know them, and it's been fun, you know. Watching now since then, I know who you are,
right?
And it's been fun watching, you know, your company and how you guys roll. And in some ways, my company, you know, one of the things that really intrigued me in our initial conversation was I've got a great brand. You know, we've succeeded in establishing a worldwide brand, but it's pretty niche, pretty small. Still, you know, 99% of the world hasn't heard of us. And I was at the point where I realized that we had a lot of competition developing where we needed to address it. So I was like, the world's changed. How do I do it? And you were one of the guys that gave me some of my first insights. So I appreciate that. So that said, that's not the introduction to Eberle Stock. That's just how I met you.
Right.
But
which I'll give us some background to that too, which is before Iowa, I had heard of the company, but only in the logo, right? So I'd seen the logo, and so talking to Glen, I was like, man, this is great. I've seen your stuff, and then I walked over to the booth and talked to him. Gosh, we talked for probably a couple hours. I
quite
think.
A while, yeah.
And it was just really refreshing because Glen is such an authentic person, and you can take it right away where you're like, Glen's solid. He's really authentic, loves the product. And I'm a gearhead, so of course I love that conversation. We can talk fucking gear for 2 hours and I'm not going to get bored whatsoever. So yeah, give us your bio, Glen.
I have a long, strange history, and you know, I thought my life was pretty good at about 26 years old. I was like, man, if I die tomorrow, it's been awesome, and it's just gotten more awesome since then. And I say that because I know I'm blessed. At the same time, I think people that from the outside looking at somebody like me would think, "Oh man, look at that guy! He's so lucky," or he's, you know, some magic thing must have happened to them that's not going to happen to me. But the truth is, I'm just a regular guy. You know, I was an awkward kid growing up in the middle of Idaho. I still can't throw a ball. I never could, you know. So I wasn't cool in school, but I could ski, you know. And I grew up on skis. I started when I was 2 years old and lived in a place where it snowed all winter long, and that was the best thing to do there. So every kind of skiing that there is, you know, from jumping to, you know, the various kinds of running through gates on alpine skis through Nordic skiing, I could do, and I was pretty good at it because I'd done it my whole life.
Well, did you grow up skiing in Brundage then? Is that
and as a kid before, you know, until I was 12 years old, I lived in Colorado. So one of the mountains up, you know, west of Denver was where I really started. Whichever direction from Denver that is. East,
right.
West. Yeah, west of Denver.
Yeah. Yeah.
So East like wouldn't be good.
A Basin and all that stuff up there.
Yeah, okay. Loveland. That's where it was the kid. That's where I skied, and then, but my dad was a kind of a cool guy. I never understood him until I saw the movie The Great Santini. You know, about the Marine fighter pilot. And my dad wasn't a Marine fighter pilot, but he was a Marine. So that was a revelation. About, you know, for me, I was like, that's why he's such a tough son of a bitch. But he also was kind of a cool guy, and that he, you know, when people didn't do things like cross country ski, he did, and he'd coach the local school kids doing, you know, teach them how to do that, and was really involved in all sorts of athletic stuff, but asymmetrical stuff at the time, and we're talking 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So he taught me how to ski when I was a kid, and then we moved to Idaho. which is just a fabulous place to ski. And I had again, God puts you in a place for certain reasons, right? So in my case, like I said, I tried to, the 7th grade basketball team, 7th grade football team. Those are, I've had plenty of heartbreak. but somewhere in there, there was a guy that lived in our town that had been an Olympian in 1962 on the cross country ski team, and he was an old Finnish fellow named Mac Miller. And the coolest thing about everything that's happened since then is I can kind of link it all the way back to Mac, because he taught me efficiency and how to move, with putting out the least amount of energy for the most amount of action. And
Right.
And that principle applies all over the place in life, but it allowed me to develop new kinds of techniques for skiing, because I was a ski racer. And
Right.
Later on, actually, I heard about one of the Norwegian national champion guys. It was like, you watch that Glen Eberle, he skis like a Norwegian. I was like, that's about the best compliment I've ever
Yeah.
had.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it was all from Mac. He taught me how to move on skis, and that was, so growing up as a teenager, that was sort of the thing that I could do. And then somewhere in there, another fellow from that town had been on the Olympic biathlon team where you ski and shoot, and he was my just childhood idol. I was like, gosh, that's so cool. And I'd started hunting when I was, maybe 13, 14 years old. So I was somewhat familiar with guns, but not great necessarily with them at the time. But started into this, exploring the sport of biathlon myself, just thinking, well, maybe I could do that, and turned out I was a pretty good shot once I learned how to really do it. And that fact, combined with the fact that I was efficient on skis, overcame the fact that I wasn't always the hardest worker. Because again, you're a teenage kid, all by yourself out slogging along on cross country skis. Sometimes it just wasn't that much fun.
Right. So you learn to suffer.
Yeah,
at an early age.
for sure. Yeah, I'd say that's definitely part of it. And where I was going with the earlier comment is about people would look at me and go, "Gosh, that guy's so lucky." Well, I can tell you, this guy got here by, even though I just said sometimes I wouldn't work that hard. The truth is, I've worked my tail off in my life. I worked my ass off, and that's really what it really comes down to is focus and hard work.
Right.
Those are the two main things that lead you anywhere in life.
Yeah,
right?
people they see like CEO. My friends are like, God, Evan, man, he's a CEO. God, that must be awesome. I was like, being a CEO, man, is kind of a lot like the cops. It's not like the fire department. Like, people don't call you just to say, hey, man, we had a great day today, everything's fine. Like, CEO, that's a tough job, man. Like, you have to solve all the problems and everything. You're the one that makes the final decision on everything. It's a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah, and in my case, it's funny. I've never called myself a CEO. I mean, part of that is because back in the 00,000s, it was sort of a trendy thing where you knew darn well the CEO of some company you're talking to is a lady sitting home in her bathrobe or her kitchen table.
Right.
So I never joined that trend. I never felt it was necessary. I was like, if people know who I am, they'll know who I am. If they don't, I don't really care.
Right.
But the other part of it, in truth, is that we're a really small company. I run a really small, efficient organization, and like most outdoor gear companies, we don't own our own factories. We use contract factories, so I don't have to. In our industry, somebody once called that feeding the tiger, and I thought that's apt. Because few companies attempt to cross the bridge of both designing and marketing your equipment and manufacturing. So I really followed the models of companies like the North Face that have broken the code, and I didn't try to reinvent that wheel, fortunately, because that would consume you. So as far as the CEO goes, I'm really more of an entrepreneur. I'm a hands on deck, on top of the ladder, stretching tippy toes, hanging it all out there to build a SHOT Show booth, and that's the way I am all through life. I'm running saws to build furniture for our new retail store and whatever it takes to get things done, which is different. But the other part of what you were saying though is the truth is this, the stress and the consumption comes in the fact that you are the firewall for everything. I'm the backstop for sure, and also the heart of the company. There's no question. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's fun.
Yeah. So how did you make the jump from biathlon to backpacks?
Oh, well, it's a really strange story. So it's a really long, strange story. It's not just biathlon to backpacks. It's biathlon to flying airplanes.
Oh yeah, well,
that's that.
Okay,
how does
there's
that
a high
happen?
arc there.
Yeah. So how did you? So when from high school,
Yep.
Where did you go after that?
So I went to college, and just another random choice. I got recruited to go to a little school in New England, and was like, oh, I'll go. If I really thought I was going to go to school in the West to college, and but I decided to go to this place called Dartmouth College because they had a good ski team, and I could do biathlon there.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, Dartmouth. Yeah,
Dartmouth's in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, it's in New Hampshire.
It's an Ivy League school. Yeah, it's a good school.
Yeah. But it's just a little place, and it was, but I was totally outgunned there. I mean, another, series of setbacks in my life were showing up to that place thinking I was smart, because in McCall, Idaho, getting A's and B's in college, or in high school rather, really wasn't all that hard. You kind of did your homework, and I was smart enough to make it all come together, and got good grades, and really I think I was smart, but I wasn't like book smart in the way, in the structural way that you need to be to survive at a school like that. So I went to Dartmouth, and some of my first grades were F's. I mean, it was just like, holy crap, what have I gotten into?
So it was a wake-up call.
Oh boy, yeah.
That's a
but
good
also, thing. It was really good. I was never on the right dean's list there. I was always on the wrong end of the dean's list. I was the one they were worried about.
I've been on both those lists.
Yeah, but the truth is, by the end of it, because I'm a fighter, man. I was not happy when I was getting busted, and tried to figure out why, and what you do about that. So by the end, the truth is I was competitive. In the last year and a half of college, I was getting the best grades that you can get, and it proven to myself that I can compete with these other people who are just people, and that was actually a really good evolution for me, for sure. But the other cool thing about that place is that two things. One is I could do biathlon, so I was doing the ski and shoot thing there, and I actually went to the Olympics in 1984 when I was a 19-year-old, whatever, sophomore, junior.
That was LA, right? Los Angeles?
No. Well, the Winter Games were Sarajevo, so it was, yeah. And this is all back when the Russia is still Russia, and the USSR is, it's behind the Iron Curtain, and Yugoslavia.
We didn't attend the 1980 Olympics.
Yeah, the summer ones they didn't. Yeah, but yeah. So then, winter '84 was in Sarajevo though, and I'd also already been to Russia and competed there at the World Championships in Minsk, Russia, when it was USSR Russia. So saw some pretty cool stuff as a young guy.
I love how you just casually stuff there. Yeah, just so kind of went to Dartmouth and kind of was in the Olympics.
Just went to the Olympics. Yeah, not a big deal.
I'm not really the CEO. I just I'm building the booth.
Just an entrepreneur.
So okay, I guess one of the genes that I possess is humility, because again, failure puts success into perspective.
How'd you do at the Olympics?
I'm super humble.
What's that?
How'd you do at the Olympics?
I'm proud of it. There are two things I will say about my career, and three. I'll get to the third one in a second. But basically, while we were competing, I was a young college kid, barely able to afford oatmeal and spaghetti, and working my tail off. And we were competing against structured, programmed, state-supported
adults.
Not just adults, but cheating bastards. I mean, the Russians and East Germans in those days, and most countries were heavy doping programs,
right.
and it really showed. 10 years later, when the curtain went down and all those state-supported athletic programs no longer had the same support, all those people that used to win didn't, and now Americans are top of that game. And so basically, the first thing I'll say is I competed honorably, which I'm proud of. I never won a gold medal at the Olympics or any medal at the Olympics, but I competed honorably, and I'd much rather live with that than those guys that were on the podiums knowing they cheated and getting their medals taken away some years later.
Right.
So that's the first take. The second is, like I said, I was a good shooter, and I got to only compete in one event in Sarajevo, and it was a day in just a blizzard. It was just a badass snowstorm. You could barely see the target, and it was crosswind, and I hit 16 to 20 targets, which was the fourth best shooting of the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which I'm proud of that. I actually performed quite well, and. So anyway, and it was another one of those great experiences. The whole.
So random question about biathlon: what caliber rifle is uniform in that?
Sure. Now it's a 22. It's a 22 caliber target rifle. It used to be a big bore, but somewhere along the way went to 22, which is perfect for it. It's still a gun. You have to be careful with it. You have to do the right things with it. But it's the ranges are more contained. 50 meters is what you're shooting at, and the challenge of shooting a small bore target rifle is just as equal as the challenge of shooting any other gun.
Right.
So yeah. Okay, so then let's get on with this colorful story. So you asked earlier what was it? How skiing biathlon led to backpacks?
Yeah.
Well, that's two parts. One is while on the U.S. team, we were carrying these guns that weighed 11.5 pounds, and it slowed you down. That was a heavy rifle to pack around on your back. And
what caliber was it then?
It was 22 still,
Okay.
but they were basically just 22 caliber target rifles that weighed too much.
11 pounds,
11.5.
22.
Yeah, big heavy wood stock and a heavy bull barrel, and because think about it, the premise was that you had to have a heavy rifle in order to shoot when you're standing there in skin tights and on skis and your pulse is beating 160 beats a minute. So everybody, the paradigm was that you had to have a heavy gun. Mm-hmm. The thing that led me to realizing you didn't was the fact that the guns had these like stocks made out of some European hardwood, birch or something like that, and they had really short grains of the pistol grip. And as this, especially in the 80s, as the skis were getting better and the speeds were increasing, well, sometimes the track preparation wasn't keeping up with the ski speed. And no matter how great of a skier you were, once in a while you'd have a pretty good wreck. And every time you wrecked with a rifle on your back, you'd stand up and that thing would be in two pieces, broken in half. Wow. And so again, being a making barely making the ends meet college kid. And I worked in the oil fields of Wyoming my first year trying to make enough money for college. And the second year, I went back to Idaho and drilled water wells. But I worked pretty hard to make every penny I could get to pay for as much of it as I could. And anyway, buying $400 rifle stocks every time one broke was no good for me. So
what happens? And I don't want to get too far down into biathlon, but what happens in that if you break your rifle in a crash?
Oh, you're done.
You're done.
Yeah,
okay.
The race is over. It's like I mean, you can kind of we don't need to go too far, but basically the race is over with that. So here's the cool thing though. Think now guns in colleges, right? Right now that those two don't mix at all. But then Dartmouth had a really cool big student workshop in the basement of the art center, and I could go down there and fire up machines and build things. And so I built a freaking guitar, thinking it's really this cool workshop, and it was just sort of like a hobby thing. And I walked in there, and this old Vermonter named Ralph Rogers, he goes, "Oh, so you want to build a guitar, do you?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, I do." And he goes, "Well, I'll teach you." And Ralph wouldn't let me use a power tool if a hand tool would do, so he taught me the old-fashioned way to carve and scrape and do stuff with tools. That experience under my belt, broken rifle stock, made me go, you know what? I'm going to go down there and see if I can build a better rifle stock. Right. So that led to me trying to make it stronger, and then I was like, I think I can make it lighter, and I think I can, do both. The realization, obviously, being if you have a lightweight rifle stock, you can ski faster. So I started experimenting with whether I could still shoot stably, blah blah blah. Ended up with a rifle that was 4 pounds lighter. So I took 4 pounds off an 11.5 pound gun, had a 7.5 pound gun, and I could ski a lot faster. Right. Like actually, the guy from the Nike Sports Medicine Research Lab did a study on it years later, and he's like, that took 1.5 minutes off of a 20-kilometer ski race. Wow. Which is huge. Yeah. That's huge. It is huge.
Substantial.
That's huge.
Just physiologically, it made that much difference. So, cool thing. And so the neat thing in the end of this is that I ended up getting a grant from the U.S. Olympic Committee to make these rifle stocks for the U.S. team. We all showed up to the 86 World Championships with these badass guns, and the Europeans just had a cow. They're looking at what the Americans have, going, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" And they actually tried to outlaw them. Because they're like, we're cheating because we have something that nobody else has, and we're like, well, you can't outlaw what we have. This is it. And that fight went back and forth for about 6 or 8 months, and then they finally went, okay, how much do those things weigh? 7.5 pounds. So that became the floor weight now for the biathlon rifle, and I have the weird distinction of being the guy that set that, and set the stage for the fact that you can ski faster. The sport's become much more dynamic, much more of a high speed thing, and anyway, I was one of the pioneers in that whole deal. So. How does this relate to backpacks?
So hold on, though.
So you got bored with excelling at everything else you were doing.
Yeah.
No, I sucked at a lot of things, man.
Just went to Dartmouth, just made the Olympic team, and then I set the standard for the Olympic rifle.
What age were you when this happened?
17. Maybe 17.
No. I think I was like 23-ish, I guess. So it was 86.
So that's
no,
a-
85,
that's a-
85, 22.
That's
yeah.
a heck of a little resume.
It's pretty neat, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was feeling pretty good about life by that time.
At that age,
Yeah.
up to 20.
Yeah.
I mean,
So how were you doing that? I guess like when you took a look at the stocks and when you started changing the stock, what were the modifications that you were making in order to pull that weight off?
I was really a pioneer with carbon fiber and laminates, and so I used I actually and again. I do, you know, I'm a Christian. I believe God puts you in places on purpose. And so there are people that show up in your life that have the key to something that happens for you. And one of the oddball things is we had a coach on the U.S. biathlon team who knew nothing about biathlon, but he was like a excellent sailor. Mm-hmm. He was like from a coach for the U.S. Olympic sailing team. And somehow he ended up on it was weird. But the dude told me about carbon fiber and Sitka spruce and sailboats and NASA wind turbines and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, those two things sound like the key to a lighter weight, strong structure,
right? Which
became the first Eberle biathlon stocks. Yeah. So get this though. This is the craziest part of all. So I'm doing all that, and I was on the U.S. national team for 7 years. And while there, I had guys from the Army National Guard trying to recruit me. They're like, hey, you know, you're doing it anyway. We'll pay you to ski race, join the Army. And I'm like, not only no, but hell no, I'm not joining the Army. No offense.
None taken.
That's actually why
It wasn't my thing.
I'm here to recruit you into Army National Guard.
No, but again, and what's been fun, you know, many years later now, I've actually engaged the military in a whole different way, and really I've gotten to know a lot of cool people that changed my perspective about that. But as a young 22-year-old kid, I had no interest in joining the Army, and some guy from the California Air Guard comes up and he goes, you know, you should join the Air Force and fly fighter planes, and we'll pay you to ski race. And I was like, what? I could do that? You know, just a normal kid or person, whatever, young adult. And he's like, yeah. So I set my sights on that, and you know, went to the Idaho Air Guard and signed up as a cook, airman first class, because it was the only thing. You know, I'm sitting there with this recruiter going, I don't want to go to like ejection seat, you know, technical school. I want to fly fighter planes. And he's like, well, the only thing you can sign up for where you can defer basic training for a little while and you don't have to go to some technical school is a cook. So I went, okay.
I'm a
Yeah.
Dartmouth graduate.
Man, I was totally shameless about it.
Signs in as a cook. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
airman first class. Yeah. So
Steven
then,
Seagal.
Yeah. So then I was on the U.S. military ski team for a couple of years and traveled around doing that while waiting for, you know, a chance to go to the pilot training. And meanwhile, I'd go to the Guard and drill with them, and they just didn't know what to do with me, so they kind of put me in the corner. I think I saw a kitchen a time or two, but not really. I never had to peel potatoes and stuff like that. It was just a weird deal. But the funny part of that was, you know, Guard units pick 2 guys a year to go to Air Force flight school. Right. And when I showed up to the pilot selection board, they're looking at me like, you're in this unit? And I'm like, yeah. You signed up as a cook? I go, yeah. And then they go, what are you going to do if we don't pick you? And I was like, well, you're going to pick me. and they liked the attitude. They liked the spirit of it, and they did. And it was all good from there. So, yeah. So then I got to go learn how to fly upside down and do aileron rolls and, you know, loops and stuff like that. And all that was so cool. I mean, I just really loved being in the military, loved flying jets. And because all the way through, I'm like pinching myself. I'm like, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Just feeling I was, you know. And that... The truth of it is, I think you can feel that way doing many things. You should. If you're doing what you're meant to do, then you should feel that way, right? And go, oh, another day. Not always good days, but still, it's good stuff. Anyway, that whole thing, I had no interest in anything else for a long time. I mean, I was going to be the commanding general of the Air Guard before it was all done. Right. You know, but I had this other thing in my head, because back to gun stocks and design work. So the last project I did in college was I took an industrial design course. It sort of seemed to be this. It was an engineering course that sort of popped up that fit my mental state, and I thought I'll do that. And it turned into this really cool course. Again, the perfect mentor is a professor that, you know, gave us these cool assignments. Like every 3 days, you had to come up with a new concept and a prototype and a proposal, as if you're pitching to a firm that hired you as a designer.
Right.
And so it was all just kind of random stuff you got assigned. But the last part of that was, I was like, I want to take that. I'd had people asking me to make hunting rifles out of this same kind of materials I'd made the biathlon rifle stocks out of, or to do one of my stocks for a hunting rifle. I'm like, that just doesn't work. It's not the same thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to design a hunting rifle. So I actually have for the 1987 copy of Guns Magazine, and on the front of it is there's a little, one of the captions says "Gun Stocks of the Future," and inside is a story about me and these hunting rifles I made at Dartmouth College.
Wow.
Remington gave me a couple guns to do it, and kind of a fun thing. That experience, though, and the thing before it had led me to think of myself as when you change a major thing like an Olympic sport, I made a significant impact on that. It recalibrates what I can do in the world, right? So
right.
Had that experience under my belt, and I had the North Face with guns in my head from 1987. Man, I was like, I'm going to build that kind of company, but for the hunting industry, and that was where it all began. And then while I'm flying airplanes through the 90s. That was just building in my head, and as much as I love being a fighter pilot, and every fighter pilot's the greatest one. Every good fighter pilot thinks he's the greatest one ever, right? So, so don't ask. But I was pretty good at it, and I really had fun doing it, and loved it. Driving 10 minutes from my house to fly fighter jets. Who wouldn't want to do that? Flew the F4 and then the A10, and it was just fun,
wow.
Badass.
Yeah, that is badass. Actually,
yeah.
I want to say actually, it's like. It's subdued and humble, but it's badass. You made the right decision. Yeah. Like,
well, no,
Army, that's
again.
Nothing
else would have led me to where I am. In all truth, which is the weird thing about it. Again, had I joined the Army, God knows, it would have been great because it would have been great is what I tried to say. But at the same time, I have a different understanding of the whole military spectrum now. That's that's quite a lot different than it was even when I was in the Air Force, Air Guard. But
how long were you in the Air Force?
15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you fly commercial too?
Yeah, so it's again just this odd eclectic story. My dad had been a United pilot, a commercial pilot, and I grew up with that. Never even thought about it. No, it wasn't my thing. I thought I was going to be a doctor, and then I discovered at Dartmouth that really sucked for me. I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Didn't like hospitals, and then I was an architect, but I really hated the guy that was running the art department at Dartmouth, so that didn't pan out, and ended up I was get this. You'll never guess what I studied. What my major was in college, because everybody wants to know what'd you major in, right? That seems important. Right.
I was going to ask. I was going to say engineering.
English.
Close. History.
Oh.
Because it was weirdly, it was the one thing I started. You have to take ran a bunch of random courses, and that was the one I was like, I actually learned something. It answered some questions about why the world is the way it is, and that realization was what led me to think, I'm actually learning something there that tells me something about the world. That's about as good of a and I've taught myself how to learn, which is, I think, the whole point of college anyway, or any schooling. So,
Most history majors I've ever met are either current or former officers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, even when I was at the University of Idaho, and so we had a shooting team. So that's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, even that was in the 90s. But then something that stuck with me there is I was in the poli-sci department. And one of the guys I was in ROTC with, I was like, man, you're really fucking smart. Why are you taking political science? Like, why is this your major? He's like, hey, dude, I'm going to be a pilot. Poli-sci to fly. Because it's all about positioning your GPA, right? And he's like, if I went into the engineering department, I could get my ass handed to me, or I'm looking at, 3 something, versus here, like, I can pontificate and bullshit my way to a 3.98 all day long. And I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense.
So again, if we get into GPAs, you'd see mine and you'd laugh, because it was not good after those first couple of years, but that was again, the cool thing about that was the right people looking at the piece of paper, and you having the opportunity to explain yourself. So when I showed them the difference between the first year of college and the last year of college, they're like, "Oh, that's cool." They're like, there's something to be said for demonstrating the ability to mature, and that's part of it too. So anyway, yeah.
So you're flying, you're in the Guard. When did you start the company?
Okay, so I mean, really, Eberle Stock was what I call it now, but the Eberle Stock company was 1985.
Oh wow!
And so, like I said, 87, I designed these hunting rifles that are still unparalleled. I mean, I'm just like, one of these days we're going to make rifle stocks again just because we have to.
Yeah,
it's just a weird thing. Then it also fits with my whole thing. North Face with guns. Well, they make tents and stuff like that. Well, we make gun stocks. Why not?
Right.
Fits our sport. But so that was something I was dabbling in every year. You asked, was I a commercial pilot? And I mentioned this thing about my dad. Well, it wasn't my target in life, but at some point I remembered the long vacations he had and the fact that when he was home 3 or 4 days a week and totally disconnected from having to do anything else. And so I had this gear company bursting out of my head, just while I was in the military. And just kind of this plan of what didn't exist. I mean, I'd go into a sporting goods store and I'd go, man, there's still nobody making anything good in here. Nobody's doing it, or a true hunting pack. And so while I was in the Guard, there's sewing rooms back where they repair gear and kit, and so there was called the parachute shop in an Air Force unit. So I'd go back at the parachute shop and be making hunting packs with this lady who could sew, and I'd tell her what I wanted. She'd help me make them, and so I had designed my first hunting pack in the late 80s. Another one of those key strange components of life was for me that fact that I told you I sucked at Little League baseball. Every game I went to when I was like 11, we lost. Every game I didn't go to, I only got to go to half them because we were doing whatever in the summertime. Everyone I didn't go to, they won. There's just something about that. I don't know what that was, but the guy who was my Little League coach later in life became the president of the North Face, and yeah, so yeah, it's just like this crazy, Forrest Gump kind of story, right? I mean, that really is my story. It's just this like strange things that happen, and so in the 80s. His younger brothers, who were my best friends, were working in Berkeley at the North Face, and they were making backpacks in Berkeley at the North Face in the 80s. And so I went out there with my design concepts, and they're like, no fucking way, don't even try. because the concepts I had were too complicated, for the era of sewing at that time, or for the production sewing. They're like, every time this gets touched, it's going to cost money, and there's way too many things to do on it. So there's no way you could build this set of concepts as a commercial product. Don't even try. And I went, oh, that's too bad. Meanwhile, spent the next 10 years building it in my head. And because of sort of that urge, I think, I decided to pull back from the military flying and remembered my dad's lifestyle, and then it was also, I had young kids coming. We had twin boys born in 1997.
Right.
So that year, I decided to pull the plug and applied to fly at United, and didn't get hired the first time. Like,
you failed at something. Finally.
I'm like, you guys are going to hire me, right? They're like, no. I'm like, what?
Everyone always says yes to me.
Well, not always. I've had a lot of no. It's just learning to overcome no. That's part of the story, right? So it took me a couple years later, I did get hired there, and I, was a commercial pilot and had progressed to being a junior captain. Again, with with the time off I had, because I left the Guard in 2000, I was thinking about, okay, now I'm gonna think, how about this North Face with guns idea that I had? What do I do with that? And I was actually, I built a shop at my house, and I was dabbling with some rifle stock designs. I'm pretty sure I'm the first guy that ever built a chassis gun. In all truth, I mean,
really,
yeah, because I was looking at picture a young kid trying to think of how to start a company. I'm like, well, I think I'm going to make a gun stock company, and maybe I'll make these hunting rifle stocks. Well, everybody starts talking to you. Well, you got to make it for the Mauser 1307 and Remington Model 700 and the Remington Model 7. And it just goes on and on. And so you go to a gun stock pattern shop or a gun stock maker shop, custom shop in those days, and there were like hundreds or thousands of gun stock blank patterns all over the walls, and just that was so daunting to even think about that. So I was like, how do I get around that? I was like, how about if I make come up with a metal insert, an aluminum insert that is the thing that you machine for each type of action. And I'd already made floating barrel stocks for biathlon, so like the 4-channel doesn't have to touch the thing. It's just 8 inches of material touches the stock. So I designed a core where you would machine the inner parts of it for whatever action, and the outer part was the same, so it always interfaced with the stock the same way. And I made, modular stuff so that a butt stock could slip onto it, and you could try different ones, and to put on different forestocks. And so I did all this stuff. That was what I was working on in the early 2000s, and then September 11th, was a big day in my life. I woke up that day and going, oh shit, my life just changed. Because I was a junior captain at United. A lot of people, I'm surprised how many later on in life, how many people don't even know that company was one of the airlines that had some problems that day. Lost two of our jets.
Right.
And, one of them was from San Francisco, my base, and it was very personal. I mean, I really took that personally. I mean, because also I have a very graphic mind. I'm sitting there going, gosh, I could picture what happened in those cockpits, and I was so pissed off. And I did two things. The first was I wrote a letter to the general of the Air Guard and told him I was coming back, because we were flying A10s at the time. I flew the first A10 into Boise. I was the lead pilot for that conversion.
Wow.
Loved the thing and left it with a little bit of heartbreak.
Right.
I left the military like 5 times, maybe 4, because every time I'd go, oh God, I gotta go back. I didn't. I'd go back for one reason or another. But September 11th, that day, I sat down and wrote the letter saying I'm coming back because I want to drop bombs on the guys that did this.
Right.
I could see what was happening. But the second part of it was, with some clarity, I saw the fact that this company I was working for was probably not going to exist much longer. Or if it did, it wasn't going to be the same. And and so I right on the spot decided, no, I'm going to make this gear company that I've been wanting to make, and I'm going to do it really. I did it as a really defensive project. I was very careful about it, because among the examples one has in life is people that failed. And so I'd met entrepreneurs who lost their companies or, got bought out and then fired from their own company by somebody. And I was just determined that I had too much treasure in my head to let that happen. So, anyway.
So did they bring you back into the Guard, or did you?
No, I
completely?
didn't. I didn't send the letter. I wrote it, and I was like, hell. And then this is all literally on September 11th, on the day.
Right.
I mean, I was at home, fortunately, and my wife was watching the news when I got up, and she goes, "Did you see what happened? 2 airplanes hit the Trade Center." I was like, "What?" Turned on the TV, and saw that, and saw what it was, and it was just so monstrous I couldn't conceive it. So wrote the letter, said I want to go kill the people that did this, and then but I'd had this rifle stock down there. I was like, actually, my first entrepreneurial goal, and truly, it was to build a sniper rifle that killed Osama bin Laden. Right. I was like, that's what I want to do, and that part of this is what I need to do today is what took over, and so at the time I didn't know if it was going to be a gun stock company or a pack company, because I had a breadth of ideas, right, and I just started working on them. Called up that old friend from the North Face, right, and said, Bill, because by that time you could go to Costco and buy a freaking rolling luggage thing that had 1 billion parts in it, all complicated stuff, and it was like $89. I think, okay, if they can make that for $89, we can make my pack for whatever. And I go, where in China do I go? Because I knew by that time that everybody was, all that the North Face didn't make backpacks in Berkeley, California anymore in 2000. And so I was like, what do I do? And he goes, don't go to China. And I went, oh, okay. And he goes, but, Vietnam's the place. And so it turns out that Vietnam is the gene pool for the best backpacks in the world, because companies like the North Face offshored in the 80s to these Korean companies who figured out how to make modern mountaineering backpacks that all modernized through the 80s. They offshored to Vietnam. And so the best pack companies in the world still are Korean-owned companies in Vietnam. And he led me to that.
Black Yak and things like
What's
that. Black Yak, I think that's one of them. I just came from Korea. So
okay. Yeah. There's a ton of them. I don't know. I mean, I have one that that I work with. We're really tight. But anyway,
that's funny, because I've never understood that relationship. I didn't realize they were Korean companies working in Vietnam. Yep. And I didn't understand the development cycle of that, because we have heard that, and I've talked to so many people in manufacturing where it's not China, it's Vietnam, and I'm like, why Vietnam? Yeah. It's the first time, and you did it for me in 2 minutes. You connected like a decade worth of questions, and that.
Well, it's funny because again, I call it the gene pool. I mean, I can make. I've made stuff in the U.S. Mm-hmm. It is really hard for us to make at any price, right, to equal the quality and the texture and the feel and the the feng shui, is that a word, of our pack. I mean, it's really hard. It's hard to get our recipe, and you know, I'm working on it again now because for various reasons there's business to be done here, and we'll do it. But the things I've developed and where I've developed them, you know, it's really kind of crazy. Again, you think back to 1980, and then a good pack was like a clunky thing, and a strong one would have an external frame, you know, so it was like, you know, straps pinned to metal, butt welded aluminum, and bag pinned to that from the other side, and that was considered a good backpack, noisy, rattly thing, and brakes, butt welds, and so
it's horrible. I remember my first backpacks, you know, because I grew up in Idaho, I grew up hiking and hunting, and it was, well, first of all, pack boards for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I know you remember
I've suffered on plenty of those.
Sure.
Yeah.
Horrendous. They're like canvas straps on a flat curved board, which makes no sense to me why anybody would even design that.
Was like a 50s design, or maybe 40s or 30s.
Yeah.
but that all evolved pretty quickly in the 80s when companies like the North Face is really the one I think of, not because of whatever, you know, peripheral connection I had to them, but they were sending people up Everest at the time, and it was a big deal, and they were starting to make lighter weight mountaineering stuff, and that whole internal frame backpack evolution had, you know, kind of gone through. It was pretty funny. So by 2000, when I was thinking about this thing, I found a firm of former North Face employees that facilitated manufacture for people like me that just didn't know how to do it. And so they were my first stop, and they were like, I'm like, this thing's got to be able to carry like serious loads, like elk quarters, maybe more than one, and you know, so it can't break when we do that. How do we do that? And they're like, oh well, you can't do that with an internal frame pack. You know, their max on those is like 60 pounds. And I was like, why? And they're like, oh, I don't know. That's just, you know, it's because the industry was carrying granola bars and, you know, freeze-dried food and stuff like that, right? So nobody had ever tried. And it's really funny. Now, one of my friendly rivals in the business is Dana Gleason from Mystery Ranch, and
that was my first introduction to good backpacks was Dana Designs, because they were doing the custom fitting, and at the time you had to drive out to Bozeman. Was that Bozeman or Missoula?
Bozeman,
where were they at? Bozeman. Yeah, you couldn't get them anywhere else.
Yeah. So I met him. He came to Boise for one of those fitting things at a local, and because he was making blue and red packs at the time, not thinking about where his path would lead him. And I went down there because I had this pack company in my head, and among the challenges were the harness and that, you know, belt and straps and how you get all that stuff right. I kind of had the bag thing figured out. I'd been making expandable rifle scabbard backpacks for myself, you know, but the other side of it, you know, to make a nice commercial product that's sort of sexy. So I actually talked to Dan about partnering with him. He's like, yeah, we could probably work something out. And then this guy walks up and he goes, well, you know, I'm an elk hunter. What do I need to carry elk hunters? He's asking Dana, and I'm standing right next to him, and Dana goes, oh, for that you need an external frame pack. You know, we don't make something that does that. And I'm standing there going, I'll be darned, really? Hey, buddy, come talk to me. So that was just the funniest part of that whole scenario. Was the takeaway from that was realizing that, you know, other people didn't see what I saw, and you know, and so within the space of 2 years, I was making packs that, you know, internal frame packs that you could load with rocks. I mean, you could fill the thing with gravel and it would carry it. You know, you probably couldn't walk with it, but the pack, you know, would not break. And that's been our model ever since.
I've carried it with some ridiculously heavy, pointless items before in the military. So, yeah,
like the pack can hold more than the user can.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I've packed some elk out, and I mean, 100 pounds of meat. I mean, you said there were 60 was the limit.
Yeah,
like, I mean,
we're way over that.
I don't think I've ever packed less than 60 pounds.
Yeah, unless you want to take a lot of trips, which nobody does if they're doing that. So,
No. You get real strong in your head real fast.
Yeah.
I think we can get this in one trip. There's only two of us. We got it.
Yeah,
we got this.
Anyway,
so when did you start making packs for the military?
Another just a cool, you know, chain of the right things happening. Me being in the right place at the right time and the right door opening. So I'd made these hunting rifle packs, and I was trying to sell them to anybody I could get to buy them, and I thought it'd be easy. Well, it turned out it wasn't, because of two things. One, I had to teach people a whole new way of going out the door. You know, trust me, if you put your rifle on your back, it changes the way you go. Period. Anybody's ever used a rifle as a brush guard, or had the thing slipping off their shoulder on a sling, and goes to that. If they have an open mind, they're done. They don't go back.
Right.
So, but getting people to embrace that was a long, tough road, and especially when you're the only one in the world doing it. We're the only company making that thing. Somewhere in there, I was at a sporting goods store in a little town over the hill, Emmett, Idaho, and this little crappy, hole in the wall sporting goods store. The guy goes, "Hey, I got a kid that does this sport called 3-gun, and they got to carry a lot of stuff. You got to make a pack wide enough to carry an AR." And I was like, "Well, I don't know anything about 3-gun, but making a pack to carry an AR sounds like I should do that." So I made our first wide format pack, a rifle scabbard pack. So where basically the whole width of the frame is the scabbard, and then the pack bag was outboard of that. And I called it the Gunslinger, and so this is 2004. 05, I made the Gunslinger GS05 model, the second model of the Gunslinger, and that one was a really good little pack. And I still have some great pictures from Iraq and Afghanistan of guys that were using it and like giving you the thumbs up, because what ended up happening was I made this thing for thinking, I don't know. I mean, the first one had like a colored logo on it, red or yellow spots and orange lettering and stuff.
Right.
But I made them in tan and olive green, a couple of them, and I got a call one day from a guy from the 3rd Special Forces Group, and he goes, "I just got to tell you." And then I'm the only person that answers the phone to Eberle Stock in those days, and for a long time afterward. But anyway, he goes, "I just got to tell you, I can wear any pair of boots I want. I can shoot any gun I want. This pack is the best thing to come our way in 30 years." And I was like, "What?" Because by that time, we'd been at war, and there was all kinds of buzz about what the Special Forces had.
Right.
I just couldn't imagine that they didn't have every way to carry every kind of weapon that a man had to carry figured out. Well, it turned out they didn't, and that was another one of those just awakenings where I was like, oh, wow, I should look into that. And so by the next year, I'm not a sniper, I don't play one on TV even,
Right.
But I've gotten to know a lot of them, and a lot of people think I have a lot more experience than I do. I certainly have shooting experience, but I just looked at the problem like what I would want if I did that, and
Right.
and it's pretty simple when you look at things that way. It's like, okay, so we need to be organized. We need to be comfortable. I know putting the weapon next to your spine is going to change the game for them, because
Right.
they can move more.
From experience, I can tell you,
agility.
yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So anyway, and then I imagine the scenarios that they're going to be in, and so I'm like, and you got to make this so they can find stuff in the dark, and so the big barn door openings and stuff like that, and then started working with the local SWAT team in Boise, and they're the ones that told me about it. In fact, it was really funny. This guy was at my shop with his sniper rifle for a rifle stock, because I was making those chassis guns.
Right.
And I'm like, here, check this out. And he's like, oh, this is the coolest thing. And he was all excited about it. And I said, hey, what do you think about this backpack I made? And he's like, oh, we don't need that. We carry our guns in a drag bag, because sometimes we might need to crawl along and drag them behind us. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, well, just try it. So I put the pack on, and I slid the rifle into the scabbard on his back, and his eyes just popped wide open. He's like, holy crap. And then he could reach back and grab the stock and pull the rifle out, and he's like, holy crap. He was super excited.
Yeah.
And that was another one. I was like, okay, I'm seeing something. And so then I'd heard this drag bag thing, and I thought, well, if that's what they want, I'll make a pack that has a scabbard that can convert to a drag bag.
Right.
And so I made these modular things starting in 05, 06, and it's all taken off since then.
I carried one of your packs. I went to a sniper course in Utah, and I was up and down those hills with an M24.
Yeah.
And that is not a light rifle.
Yeah.
And man, they gave me one of your packs to test out, because I was one of the senior guys in the course. So they gave me one of your packs to test out, and so yeah, I humped Eberle Stock.
Cool.
I had no idea how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
I was like,
know,
the herbal stock.
Yeah. And I've heard it every different way.
Yeah.
You didn't say gerbil stop. Thanks
I
for saying
did.
that. Yeah. But anyway, I love meeting guys that use our stuff, though. It's so, I mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity to join the Army, and it wasn't my thing. But while in the Air Force, first I was a fighter pilot, flying F-4s, I was more interested in 600 miles an hour than what was going on the ground. And,
Right.
and air-to-air combat was really fun. And that, that was the world I was living in. It was all air. little bit of awareness of this stuff going on down there in the ground with the.
I'd hope so. As an A10 driver,
well,
I would
so
hope
that
so,
but
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I'm talking as an F4 pilot.
Oh,
So
right,
I was
okay.
flying the Wild Weasel. We're the first in, last out. It was just the coolest thing ever. And you spend some time flying in the Middle East. Shot a harm at the Iraqis one night. And it was pretty cool stuff. It was really cool. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if the U.S. Air Force still flew the F4 Phantom, because it was the funnest, coolest thing I've ever done.
Really?
I mean, it was like the last Mach 2 airplane,
right?
And just this, you knew you're flying like this badass muscle car, and it had this really cool engine response where you just kind of you go with the throttles just by you moving your left hand. You just felt the power in this thing. It was a really cool thing.
I wasn't in the military, but I will tell you this: like, I think that the A10s, like the sounds that you hear on social and stuff, are awesome. And I can say this. Of all the guys that I'm friends with that have been over there, like most of them have a story involving an A10.
Yeah.
They would hear that sound, and they would just like, oh man, they just got a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and again, that becomes the next chapter in my story. Is that when I found out that we were going to the A10, I was like, darn, it doesn't have afterburners. And I was kind of bummed, but it does have that gun. That's pretty cool. Let's find out what that's about. And so, the first interesting thing about flying the A10 is that as a fast mover pilot, coming out of this rock solid big badass airplane, you walk around an A10, it's like, this is different. You poke your head up into a panel in the bottom of the airplane, you can look down the fuselage, like it looks like a Cessna inside. It's really funny. And then there are no two-seaters, so the first time you fly one, you go fly it. So
right.
you do this kind of, the simulators even suck. You really had no experience with the airplane other than how to start it, how to work the brakes, and what you knew what the stick and ailerons and throttles did, right? So first time out of the chalk, I tapped the brakes. You do a brake check when you roll the airplane, and it felt like it's put together with bungee cords. I was like, what in the hell am I doing here? It's just the strangest thing. But you sit way up high, the cockpit's way down low. But that means that there are two advantages the A10 has, from the pilot's perspective. The first is great visibility from the cockpit. I mean, you're sitting way up in this bubble, and the rails are down low, so you can see a lot of the universe around you. And the second part is it goes slow. So those big fat wings, they turn tight circles and they go slow, so you can see things you don't see going 600 miles an hour.
Right.
And those are why it's the best airplane in the any Air Force in the world for doing modern warfare, the kind of warfare we've been in. So the interesting chapter is that I was one of the lead pilots for the Air Guard to convert to the A10 from our unit. So I went to Tucson for like 7 months, first through the regular course and then through the instructor course. Because I was one of the first guys, I also, part of our mission was forward air controller. So I became an air fac.
Right.
And in doing that, I had to learn all about what guys were doing on the ground. And I was like, it was obviously a great awakening for me in that, all that stuff in the air is cool. If you have if you're going air-to-air combat against the Russians and it's wave of airplane against wave of airplane, like red flag kind of training stuff. But the truth is, that's not the world we're in right now. The world we're in is, good guys on the ground that need help from the air, and figuring all that out. It's really about what's going on the ground, and that recalibration of my perspective was really cool.
The guys on the ground had to go through a big learning process in that too. Everything prior to 9/11 was the Asian step. Going through, fighting the land war in Asia, as they say.
What's the speed differential? I guess what's the slowest the A10 can go, and what's the top speed in it?
Oh, I don't remember.
But it goes really slow, right?
Landing speeds are just above 100, and so you maybe 140 might be slow flight in the thing. I'm not a numbers guy. I count to about 3 and then lose track after that. It's one of those things. But then high top speed might be 380, something like that, 350-ish. But your cruising speed in it, that's like if you're, in fact, I always thought it was the coolest thing too, because looking at it before you fly it, you're like, man, that's just the cool. So I had a friend from flight school. I was going to fly the F4 and he was going to fly the A10, and we were buddies, and I was kind of jealous of him. I'm like, dude, man, that's so cool. And so we kind of check with each other once in a while along the way, and I'm just having a blast, lighting afterburners and flying the F4. And I call up my buddy and I go, hey, how's it going? And he goes, just total disgust in his voice. He goes, I can slow down going straight fucking down. Because it has those, big giant speed brakes on it, and the myth is that when you pull the trigger on the gun, the airplane slows down.
Right.
It doesn't really, but it kind of feels like it does, and might as well.
It kind of looks like it does too, to be honest with you. When you see the gun go off, and especially when you're really close to it, it's phenomenal. It's fucking super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's loud. Everything's big. Yeah. It's just super cool.
It is cool. I mean, honestly, as a marksman, that was just so fun to get to shoot the airplane.
Right.
Basically, it's like shooting a gun, right? You are shooting a gun.
Yeah.
Like 65 rounds a second. I can't remember how much the projectiles weigh, but the slugs are heavy.
Yeah.
400 and something thousand foot-pounds of impact energy per slug at like 4,000 yards, I think.
Right.
It was.
20,
it's just
right?
crazy. Huh?
20 millimeter?
30 millimeter.
30 millimeter.
Yeah, these just giant. It's like shooting ketchup bottles, and 65 a second. And it was spectacular.
Yeah.
It was like this thunderous roar inside the airplane and smoke going everywhere. It was crazy.
You've seen those things work, haven't you?
Well, I just referenced it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
No, meaning
listening?
like
Welcome to the conversation, Baker.
No,
I'm
in your
glad you're paying
previous
attention.
job,
What's that?
in your previous job,
Yeah, that's where I would have seen it.
maybe some training facility or something like that.
No, I because we had done several close air support training missions, and then obviously using close air support downrange, and we never used them in Iraq because it was all like helo, and it's all like really shitty. When I say that, it's not precision, right? It's like I got 3 Kiowas on station or an Apache or something like that, right? But when you went to Afghanistan, it was different because they had where'd you guys have them? Kandahar, I believe. Did you guys still have them coming out of Bagram and Kandahar?
Well, which year?
Well, I know they had them coming out of Kandahar for quite a while.
Yeah.
They had everything.
We have had them in
Kandahar.
Bagram. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a big, heavy machine that's loud and fucking intimidating for the right reasons. Like it's just all the right reasons.
It is. It's interesting. I mean, the Air Force has this impulse to get rid of things like that. Like I mentioned, I flew the Wild Weasel. Well, there's no airplane that's ever going to replace what that thing could do. It was because it was built in 1969 of hard stuff, didn't flex, and it had all these receptors all over it, so that when you're pulling G's, they're not moving relative to each other. Where all these new modern carbon fiber plastic airplanes, it's all wobbly gobbly, and they can't get the same. The sensors don't work the same way on that stuff. So
when you're really flying some of those too, right?
Yeah,
so
versus stick and rudder and feet stomping and crazy stuff. But
do you still fly, Glenn? Do you have a?
Yeah, I will. I really want to, but I've been kind of busy.
Yeah. Well, if you had your choice, what type of flying would you do recreationally?
My world changed last spring when I went to New Zealand, joined up with a helicopter outfit, saw what helicopters do in big mountains, and I was like, okay, I got to sell enough backpacks to buy a helicopter because I want one of these things really bad. I was like, that's honestly, my wife was along. We had just the best time, and big smile on her face, and she's on the internet. Like, well, they're kind of expensive, and I'm like, yeah, we're not there yet. but in truth, they're big in New Zealand for good reason, you know? And where I am, backcountry flying is like bush flying in Alaska, and Idaho has all these little strips in the backcountry for fixed wing, and I can see myself doing that. I mean, I could see a float plane, or but I have to sell a lot of backpacks.
It's a lot of backpacks. Well, I think I was telling you that because I started getting my pilot's license in McCall from Lori McNally. She runs the backcountry flight school up there, and it's all Super Cubs, so it's all tail dragger Super Cubs that are up there that she uses. I think she might have a couple others, but super cool. I mean, and when I say that, it's like, McCall is one of those places where not very many people know of McCall, but when you do, you're like,
dude, you just told 50,000 people. What are you thinking?
Well, I think the people that want to listen to this podcast are the kind of people we want to run into.
Okay, all right, good. I'm good. I'm good with that.
That's where I was going to go. The first time I threatened to get out of the Army, I was going to go to McCall. I was going to actually start a dude ranch in McCall.
No, right on. It's not too late, man. You know, I'm just going to tell you the chapters of my life are proof that you can do many things in life. You know, you just flip the page and do something else.
I'd hurt myself now. Back then, I was riding every day. But
well, a dude ranch wouldn't be that much fun anyway. You got to feed the horses and all that stuff.
So I like horses a lot more than I like people. So that'd be an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so what's next for you guys? What's next for the company?
Well, so a couple things. The first is, you know, I mentioned earlier that I built my company really defensively. So I was determined to own it when it was all said and done.
Right.
And I was really worried that some of the big guns in the industry would see this little upstart and what I had and just try to, you know, knock me off and steal the idea and put me out of business. And so I figured out how to write patents and wrote my first couple patents. And then sometime later, you know, when I failed at another one, I got a patent attorney involved. But, you know, this is in the early 2000s when I was doing all this stuff. All the way through, I flew for United until the fall of 2008. I was a one-man show with my wife doing the picking and packing and shipping when I wasn't home, but she didn't like to do the phone thing. So if I was in the cockpit and the wheels were up, and sometimes if I was in the cockpit, I'd answer the phone anyway. Well, there's nothing going on, you know, sitting at the gate waiting to go.
So that doesn't affect anything.
What? The cell phone?
The cell phone.
I knew it. One time I'm sitting there, I'm on the flight deck of a United Airlines airplane and waiting to go. There's nothing going on. The phone rings. Cell phone. And the 800 number went to cell phone at the time.
Right.
And it was always me answering. If I was in the air, it didn't get answered. But any other time, night or day, I'd answer it. So I'm like, Eberle Stock, can I help you? And, you know, some guy places an order, so I pull out a scrap of paper and I'm writing the order on it, you know, writing
the autopilot button,
stuff in my pocket, and the guy I'm flying with looks over and he just laughed. Because at the time, there were a lot of airline pilots that were really wishing that they could do something else. It was just a really tough time in the industry. So they're all like getting real estate licenses and, you know, and I was a scrapper. They were kind of proud of me. And he looks at me and he goes, "So, this is Eberle Stock Mobile World Headquarters, is it?"
That's funny.
Yes, it is. And he laughed. I think we were going to Hawaii or someplace, and because I was flying to the islands at the time because it was perfect because it was, you know, 4 or 5 hour flight to Hawaii, and I'd have 30 hours there to work, and I just worked my tail off on this thing I was building, and so I did that through 2008, very defensively, as I said, and very carefully. And so my first, you know, you mentioned that part of the idea is to kind of communicate what made us different or successful, and you know, the knowledge that you could lose all your ideas was one of the things that drove my, you know, care. And then the second was, you know, figuring out how you pay for things as a business. You know, I got to order, you know, 1,000 backpacks. How do I pay for that? You know, that kind of money. And so I had a banker that maybe write a business plan, which was an interesting exercise, and I, you know, didn't know what one was, so I went and figured out how you write one of those. And the internet existed, thankfully, so I was able to, you know, study and learn a lot, and did that. And he went back and read it, and he goes, "Okay, it looks pretty good." And well, you got equity in your house, don't you? And I went, "Yeah." So he goes, "Okay, so that's what we'll base the loan on." So he basically made me write a business plan so he could loan me my own money for my house. Right. But in truth, it was good. It was the right thing.
That's kind of scary, though, isn't it? Because if your business goes down.
Oh yeah, I mean it was. We were all in. You know, it was, and
I mean, you're talking to a guy who's never failed at anything in his life.
That's true.
Other than baseball. Eberle Stock,
dude, man,
good at gear, bad at baseball.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, well, we could carry bats in our scabbard though. That'd work. And balls inside. That'd be good for that.
This advanced Western hunting.
The baseball bat. Yeah. Anyway, So by the fall of 2008, I left the United and was just all in with Eberle Stock, and I bought a couple buildings in Boise, you know, and because I was like, okay, now it's time, you know, we have enough water under the boat, sales are up, it's time to, you know, to get some people in here and build a gear company, but my wife Gail has been, you know, in neck to neck with me, and hands around my neck a few times through this thing, and so she's been a really reluctant passenger in this. Neither of us were business people, and she, you know, fought me tooth and nail on everything I wanted to do. But as the company succeeded and grew, she'd, you know, kind of give me a little bit more rein. And so, the fall of 2009, summer of 2009, I needed more space, so I found these old buildings down on Main Street in Boise, and they were just horrible, nasty-looking things. They were built in the 40s, the first one, and the other one in like the 70s, nondescript thing. And the old one had this tar paper covered barrel roof, and somebody in the 70s had tried to modernize it by putting metal siding all over the top of what turned out to be a brick building underneath it. And I just love old stuff, so I saw this old brick building, but mainly I was looking at the space, and then got inside of it, and I was like, oh man, I could just see the gear company that could be in this thing. And I was super excited, and bought it super cheap because nobody wanted it because it was such a nasty, eyesore.
How many square feet is the building?
You're asking me a number.
Numbers.
Yeah.
Three.
I don't know. I can
Three
tell you what I paid for it, but I won't. It wasn't much, but it was more than 3 though. It's more than 3 square feet, but it's pretty big. It's whatever it is.
More than 3, less than a million.
I think we might have 18,000 square feet between the 2 buildings down there, something like that, or 20. I don't know.
So you're in Boise, not Garden City, right?
I have another warehouse that we built in Garden City. So we crossed the river to get stuff. But our headquarters are just by the river on Main Street in Boise.
So with that space in Boise, are you still manufacturing in Vietnam?
Yeah, so a couple things. But the better part of this Boise story, though, I got to tell you this because again, this comes back to what do you do when stuff goes south, right? Or the stuff doesn't go your way. Because I have not succeeded at everything, contrary to myth,
and contrary to what Baker would put out.
Yeah. So bought those buildings. I was down there like the man on the ladder with the screw gun, screwing siding off it to see what was underneath. And people are like, "Oh crap, stop!" And I didn't know there was a brick building under that. What are you going to do? And you want to sell it? And I'm like, no, I don't want to sell it. So this old nasty thing, but really cool bones. And so we were fixing it up. We had the retail store. The future Eberle Stock retail store was 2009. It was ready, and I was, because I had the model of like these other brand outlets. I was like, well, this would be a cool place to show people how cool this is. Yeah. And then we had the big warehouse with this barrel roof. It was built out of an old airplane hangar, coincidentally, which is just a cool thing. Yeah. And it was just about done being remodeled. I was coming back from the archery trade show in January 2010, going through O'Hare Airport, and found out that it was on fire. And by the time I got home that night, it was gone with all of our product, all of our inventory. No. Yeah. So, me being me, I thought of everything that could happen. So I somewhere along the way, I'd assessed whether I should have insurance on the product, and actually, my friends are the Boise cops, right? So this guy's like, how much can they haul off if they break in here at night? So I'm like, yeah, the amount the insurance policy cost me didn't equate to the number of backpacks somebody could steal if they broke in the building. So I didn't. So I lost everything. Lost the building. The building was insured. Everything in it was gone. So I'm standing in Chicago, going, oh God, I finally got the courage mustered up to watch the thing burn down on the internet. Stuck there all day. Got home at 11 o'clock that night to a smoking ruin, and it was just heartbreaking because I loved the building, but while standing in O'Hare Airport, I was struck by how much I just had lost. I was like, all of our money is gone and all of our product, and what do I do? And I just go like, well, somewhere in my history, I've had as little money and as little products as I have right now. I'm just there again, So I started bootstrapping again. Did it a second time, but the second time I had the advantage of being in the market. It was 2010. By that time, Cabela's and Sportsman's Warehouse and our big partners on the retail side were having success with our brand, and they were excited about what we were doing. And so this was, get this, the ATA show ended on Friday. Saturday morning, I'm flying home, I find out the thing's on fire. Sunday morning, instead of driving to Las Vegas with our show booth, I'm digging through rubble, and we were actually able to pull a few backpacks out of the bottom of this crazy fire, and so we had a few viable smoked, truly a fire sale opportunity. So I think we salvaged like 400 or 500 packs that were just smoking. And I still hear from people once in a while, they go, yeah, I still have one of your smoked packs, and so those were the bridge that let us get through there. So get this. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday's SHOT Show set up, Tuesday SHOT Show begins. And so I'm in Boise on Sunday going, well, I guess we'll fly to Las Vegas tomorrow. So we put some bags in duffel bags, and I think I'd just started shipping stuff to the shows so we had a crate here with some stuff in it that we could use for the booth. And set it up and had clippings from the Boise newspaper about this fire. And when the buyers walked up, I said, hey, we're not going to have much product for about 3 months, but when we get it, we really need you to buy it. And they were like, okay. So got Cabela's wrote a big $250,000 PO, which for us at the time was huge, and Sportsman was anteed up, and everybody supported us right through it. And then other partners pitch into, like Source Bladders from Israel, the guys who do our hydration bladders. Found out that we lost 1,000 bladders or something, and they sent them gratis, free. And Mossy Oak, we were using their camo, and they pulled out the stops to give us whatever we needed to print new paper and new fabric. And so it was pretty neat, and I think too that I'm a good guy, I'm one of the good guys, so that was part of the strength of the relationships that I developed, and everybody was in to support us, so it was kind of cool. But
that's awesome.
It really sucked though.
Yeah, that's brutal.
So again, that what goes next? I think the reason I got into that is that the struggle that one has when you have to build a company is a big one. So just when I thought I was succeeding is when we lost it, and I had to do it again. Right. The second time around, I didn't have a full-time employee until I think actually I hired Gail's sister, my sister-in-law Karen, in 2011, just to kind of help us to get through this, and she came to work with us. So she was our first full-timer, and then but we didn't have a lot of money, so it was several more years before we started kind of getting our feet back under us.
What made you decide to start again? I mean, you had a successful flying career, so you weren't relying on your company to pay your bills, right? And so it wasn't an all or nothing.
I was there. This is a very personal venture for me. Yeah. It's really coincidental that it has my name in the company, but it used to be the Eberle Stock company, and then as I was trying to put this North Face with Guns thing together, I brainstormed all kinds of names for the company, trying to think of what would be good. And one of them, ironically, is funny. Another local guy named Jay Roberts owned a company called Black Creek Guide Gear, and he was trying to sell that to Plano Holdings. They were building this Plano Synergy thing, and he ended up not able to put that deal together, so he went to work with Plano and built Tenzing packs. And I was one of the first guys he told about it, so we're friendly rivals, and he took me to lunch and told me what he was doing. I was like, oh, that's cool. But I was laughing when he told me the name. I go, dude, man, I thought of that name too, because that Tenzing Norgay, and I'm like, I'm sure I have a logo somewhere. You want? Seriously? Yeah, I'd been down that road and I drew back, and it ended up in my brain going, I wanted to be able to tell the story of the biathlon rifle stock and the kind of strange, unique history that our brand had. And so I thought, well, what if I put Eberle Stock together, make one word, and Google that? It was the only thing I Googled, and that was how that came about. And it's been good. So to get back to answer your question, though, what happens next, the aftermath of all of that is that, we had the wind out of our sails for a while, got it back, everything's fine. Meanwhile, I've got, kids growing up and life to live. So I stopped and built a house, and somewhere along the way, and I was sort of off the ball with what was going on in the marketplace around us. And, I woke up about 2 years ago and going, gosh, there's a lot of people trying to do what we're doing. There's a lot of people coming at us, and trying to, and at the same time, it's funny when you see that happening, you feel maybe a little vulnerable, like, we were sort of becoming perceived as the old company, the guys that have been around for a long time. Everybody gets excited about what's new, right? So, and I was not a marketer. I wasn't communicating the horsepower and value and all the cool stuff that's just lying around the floor in my office that we could be doing. And I was exhausted, part of the second time around, and all this other stuff in life was like, I think I just need to go someplace for about 3 or 4 months, do a little Zen. And also, our company was doing okay, but not great. I shouldn't say that. Our company's always been rock solid, but it wasn't growing the way it used to, sort of plateaued. Because meanwhile, there's all these other companies popping up around us doing cool stuff, and some of them were doing, moving into spaces that I saw for us long before they existed, but I didn't pursue them because I got busy with PAX, and then one thing and another, and then a little fire, that thing happened, and so after all that, 2 things happened. The first is that I was like, okay, I made the decision. I'm going to keep this company. I'm going to own it for as long as we want to own it, but I'm going to make it into what it should be, because we've never done that. You know, we've got a great, cool, niche global brand, but it's never been the company that should be, in terms of just, you know, revenue and market presence and all the rest of that. And the second thing is I realized that the world's changed. You know, the way that people engage brands and communicate about brands and the communities that you can develop are so different now than they were 3 years ago. So I hired some really cool guys. You know, I finally got that 2009 vision 10 years later has come to fruition, where we finally have the core crew, just the right guys. And so, you know, now we're communicating what we're doing much better, and it's much more interesting. It's fun, and there's a lot of cool energy around the place as these guys are all charged up about it. And I'm just like going, okay, so these, you know, guys that have been making performance gear think they can compete with me. Sure, they can, but they're not going to beat me.
Right.
When I think about this whole thing, I'm like, I'd a lot rather be me than anybody that's going to compete against me, because I'm going to win. That's just the way I see it. And,
right.
And I think that's true. But then, so what we're doing now is we're making some pretty cool performance apparel. You know, that was sort of the next step. That one thing that we hadn't gotten to, that I've been working on for ever. Again, part of the key to that is just finding the place. And how if Eberle Stock is going to make something, in my view, it has to be the best thing in the world.
Right.
And maybe there's an equivalent, a different flavor that somebody else does. That's fine. But if somebody says theirs is better than mine, I take that personally. I don't think that. I don't want that to happen.
I know the answer to this question, but I just need to ask. So when everything burnt, did you ever think about quitting, or just saying, well, to hell with it, like, I can't start over?
I didn't tell you the best part of that story yet. So I did tell you we showed up here at the SHOT Show. We had the smoky packs, and people had gone, yeah. Thursday that week, third day of the show, I get a call from my insurance broker, and he goes, "Oh man,
oh no,
you know where this is going."
Oh man,
he goes, I hate to, I'm the one that's got to tell you this. I'm sorry to tell you, but it turns out your building wasn't insured. They're not going to cover it. They're not going to cover the loss. And I'm like,
holy shit.
Yeah, say what?
Come again?
Yeah, this, so, you know, talk about getting some gut punches. I mean, just one after another, right? And or sucker punches, worse yet. So, yeah, I go home from this show with that news having been delivered. So the second part of the sentence was this. He goes, yeah, you know, Naomi in the office checked the wrong box, and they wrote the wrong kind of policy.
What?
And yeah, no kidding. So he goes, but don't worry, you know, our errors and omissions insurance will cover it. You're just going to basically write your claim on our policy. Everything will be fine. I'm like, oh, okay. It was the first time I'd ever heard of that.
That's like insurance for insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I was like, what's that? And discovered just what you said. It's insurance for people that screw up their own insurance writing. And that turned, you know, they were all like friendly and nice about it for about 3 months, but nothing much was happening. And I'm kind of asking them what we do, and you know, we're cleaning up this mess and trying to get on with life and drinking heavily.
Yeah,
not really.
Self-medicating.
Yeah. But anyway,
sobbing nightly.
Yeah, it was a tough road. I'm not going to deny it. You know.
So did they come through with errors and omissions?
No. So about 3 months later, I got a letter from some legal office out in Wichita or someplace. That's the master office. That's basically a letter. To paraphrase, it says, you know, this may or may not have been our fault, but you're going to have to sue us to find out.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was just, you were just tumbling down a hill.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's pointing fingers at me, telling
one.
it's my fault. Well, it's arson, right? You know, you burn it down yourself, right? And that's one of the first things. Of course, it wasn't. I mean, you
weren't even in the.
Yeah, and yeah, but I mean, but that's the sort of thing that people come up with when you're in that circumstance.
Right.
So and then honestly, that company was trying to get me while I was down. They were hoping I'd go out of business and settle for something less than what they owed me.
Right.
Absolutely. You know. And
yeah.
And I saw that, and I was pretty pissed off, and decided that I wasn't going to let that happen. And I'd never been in a legal. This is the only legal conflict I've ever been in my life. But I was like, well, I've got to do something. So I went and found a lawyer and told him the story, and he's like, I'm an honest person, and he's looking at me and this story, and he goes, man, we get you in front of an Idaho jury, you're going to be rich. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds. I don't know if I want to get rich this way, but I think it's justified, so let's do it.
Right.
And so that went in. The next thing he said though was interesting. He goes, if you wait around for them to write you a check for that building, you're going to be waiting a long time. The best thing you could do is just build it back the way it was and then hand them a bill.
Right.
So while I'm bootstrapping the company second time, I'm also bootstrapping a building project. And I was so mad about this whole evolution of events and so heartbroken that we lost this cool old iconic building that I when the guys were demoing it, if there was a viable brick wall standing or a column of concrete that was charred, anything that was viable that was structurally there, I made them leave it. So we have these like pieces of building sticking up out of the foundations of the old building, and I found the right builder, this cool guy named Todd Weltner with a company called Vertical Corp in Boise, and he just was the right guy again to do the next thing and help me to put that thing back up the old way. So the carpenters are showing up going, man, this is so cool. Nobody builds stuff like this anymore. Big rough sawn timbers and, purlins and planking over that. And we built the thing a lot cheaper than you'd ever imagine. If you come in our building someday, you're going to go, yeah, this is really a cool, nice building. And it's still the best thing I've ever done in terms of value. So over the course of the 2010 year, we built that thing back out of pocket, and 3 years later, back dealing with the insurance people in some jackass scenario. It's like dealing with the car dealer when you're trying to buy a car, and it's like, let me go back and talk to my supervisor. So they hire some judge to mediate, and I'm like, mediate what? You guys want to write a check for about $3 million right now? That'd be just fine with me. Otherwise, I have nothing to talk to you about.
Right.
Anyway, but I also wanted to get on with life and move on. So this whole day goes by, and they're nickel and diming me. And by the end of the day, it came down to basically this thing where the last offer was on the table, and I said, okay, so here's the deal. You're going to pay me what you should have paid me 3 years ago, day one, and you're going to pay that lawyer over there whatever he needs to get out of your hair, and we're done.
Yep.
And that's how it ended. So that's where they wanted to get. They knew they were going to lose. I mean, it would have been worth a lot more money to me to wait 2 more years and go to court, and that's just not my style.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
That's just insane that it has to be that way.
Well,
It's
they knew that was going to happen. Like, that's how they work.
No, it's a 10 to 1. Like they figured 9 out of 10 times they're going to do this. The one time they're gonna push a guy like Glen, and then Glen's gonna push back, and that's where they're gonna end. Yeah. But then the other 9 guys are gonna fold that are in this similar situation. If it's a national company, I mean, I'm just saying this because I've dealt with my own legal issues over the last year. But I went through 2 years of bullshit to literally settle it for the original offer. Yeah, it's just so stupid. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Yeah. The 2 years of bullshit and stress. Well,
they were hoping. I think for me, they were the whole way hoping I would just quit and go out of business. And I've somewhere in there, I'm like, gosh, this is kind of like winning the lottery. This is going to be I could use that money.
Right.
Think of all I could do with that, because we actually did the math of what I should be making had they paid me with that. Instead of not having money to work with, and that was going to be the premise of where we went, and absolutely. It was justified, absolutely. But I survived anyway, and the cool thing is my wife and I can look at each other and go, we've earned everything we've got. Yeah, and nobody's ever given us a thing, and that's the right way. It's kind of cool, actually. I'm kind of proud of that. So it is cool.
Well, that's it. Listen, Glen, this is an awesome story. I don't want to cut it off, but we're at an hour and a half. So this has been an awesome episode. I've been wanting to get you on the show for 2 years since we met in Germany. So I think for me to preface this to the guys that are listening to the shows, one, you got to check out the company. We don't advertise on the show, but you got to check the company out. You guys did a video not too long ago on your background, but you heard it from Glen here on the show, but they just released a video that's on the website. Glen's background kind of gives the company history. But such a cool and authentic company with a great history, with really a great entrepreneur, not CEO, founder. So thanks a lot, Glen. I really do appreciate you being on the phone.
I appreciate you bringing me.
Yeah.
It's fun to visit.
Say the company name one more time, Glen.
Eberle Stock.
Eberle Stock.
Eberle Stock.
Eberle Stock.
Eberle. Eberle.
Yeah, go check it out on all the social medias. All the social medias, but definitely go check them out. And by the way, if you guys belong to the Black Rifle Coffee Club, we give you a little discount for Glen's company as well.
Absolutely.
So
we're glad to play in your world and really appreciate the invitation. It's really fun to get to know you.
Well, I just love this. Like, this is the best part of the job. Like, for me, this is like one of the best parts of the job is meeting other guys in the industry, veteran entrepreneurs that have continued to just beat it down on a regular basis, and being able to work with guys like you and then tell their story. It's just like, it's probably one of the best parts of this job, to be honest with you.
Fun.
So thanks a lot, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yep. Thanks, guys.